Welcome to another episode of Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, where certified financial planner Lauren Sherman shares thoughts on having a healthy mind, body, and spirit, an abundance of wealth inside portfolios and out, and lessons learned from clients and mentors over the years.
Thank you so much for joining me today on another episode of the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast. As always, I am your host, Lauren Sherman, and I want to say a special Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of our clients, family, and friends, and of course, all of the listeners who I haven't had the opportunity to connect with. In my household, we just got done celebrating with family on Christmas Day, and weather permitting, we have 2 more celebrations with more family just around the corner. I think when you live in Iowa, there are certain months where everything becomes weather permitting. Today's episode is going to be a rebroadcast from one that was originally released to kick off the beginning of 2022. I re-listened to this episode myself, and by doing so, it ended up reminding me how I wanted to start off the 2022 year. Now that we are in December and nearing 2023, I've been able to reflect and see which goals I accomplished, which started out strong and then got off track, as well as a couple that never really caught much traction in the first place. Listening to this episode again also made me realize that I need to do a better job keeping my goals in front of me and revisiting them from time to time. At least for me personally, it's clear that I would have had more success with a quick, even 30-second check-in each day to see how I did and how I can set myself up for success moving forward. Setting goals for a whole year can be challenging, so breaking it down into weekly and monthly targets to hit is an adjustment I will be making for 2023. And even though I covered that in this episode, sometimes I need to do a better job of taking my own advice. And finally, even though this is a replay of a previous episode, I made one small change to the name of this one, as I've retitled it to Promises for 2023. When I think about goals, I almost have an immediate assumption that I will hit some goals and fall short on others. But when is the last time you fell short on a promise? We don't make promises to ourselves or others with any intention of breaking them. Once again, this is a rebroadcast, so I will still be using the word goals throughout this episode, but I think reframing these as promises to ourselves will help us identify not only what is most important, but what we really want to commit to and make that promise to ourselves. So with that quick introduction and self-analysis of how I did last year, let's jump into this rebroadcast to make this upcoming year our best one yet. If you visit our website, the first words that jump off the page read, "Helping people live a purposeful retirement." Now, a lot of financial firms have a catchy tagline, but what gives it power is when there's action behind it. So whether you think of this as your purpose or a list of goals to accomplish, today we're going to talk through how to best set yourself up for success. In fact, many resolutions people optimistically start at the year with don't make it to February. I think some of this has to do with the types of resolutions we often set, as well as our planning and accountability throughout the year. Regardless, we're going to do our best to change that and develop some long-lasting changes for the better. When it comes to setting goals, some people like a simple process. I've had many clients come in for a goals meeting, and we start by drawing a circle on the left side of the page, representing where they are now. Next, we draw another circle off to the right side of the page, representing where they want to be in the future. Then, we discuss what needs to happen in order to connect the dots. At this point, they're often running. More details would just bog them down and get in the way. Others do better with a much more intentional plan, one with clearly defined steps, accountability measures, and check-ins along the way. Everyone is a bit different, so keep that in mind as I share my process for setting goals and tweak things as needed. I say that with one caveat. Try not to dismiss an idea just because it makes you a little uncomfortable. If you find yourself thinking, "That's not the way I have done it," think for a moment if you've gotten the results you've wanted in the past. If you have, great. It sounds like your process works. But if you have not gotten the results you'd like, perhaps it's time to give something different a try. For the purpose of today's talk, I'm going to walk you through an exercise with 9 steps. It might feel like a little overkill, but I think sometimes in life we see things so often that it gives us a false sense that we're familiar with it. We think we know how to go about something just because we've seen it a lot. I know this is true for me, as I've heard about goal setting my whole life, but just because I've always heard about it didn't mean I really knew how to go about it. Another reason many of us have probably avoided going through this process in the past, if we're being honest, goal setting can sound kind of boring. But I promise you, being stuck in a rut without making improvements is far more boring than the time and effort it takes to make drastic improvements. Who knows, as you work toward your goals, you'll likely even get some momentum and find that it actually can be a fun process. So as always, after my long-winded intro, let's kick it off with step number 1. Many of you have likely heard of setting SMART goals. SMART being an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. This is a great framework, and we will talk through each, but first, let's take one step back and look at this through a wider lens. Before we start brainstorming specific goals, take a moment to think about your core characteristics. How do you see yourself when you are at your best? When we think of who we are, it may be easier to brainstorm goals and ideas that will stick much longer than a New Year's resolution. So when you're thinking of your core characteristics or describing your best self, you may see yourself as a father or mother, a grandfather or grandmother. Maybe your business or work comes to mind, perhaps hobbies like traveling or playing golf. Whatever it might be, if we set goals that align with our core characteristics and our best self, then we're far more likely to stick with it when the going gets tough. You could also think of this as your why. When your why is strong, it's like sitting on a stool with 3 solid legs supporting it. If your why isn't very strong, picture what it would look like to sit on top of a stool with just one leg. It's going to be very hard to stay upright and keep that goal going. One quick example comes to mind before we move on from this. The most popular New Year's resolution is to get healthier. Whether this means working out, eating right, or a combination of the two, the person who simply wants to lose a few pounds to look better is going to have a hard time sticking with the plan. This is because they're sitting on the stool with just one leg supporting it. On the other hand, the grandfather who had a medical scare and he's told that he won't be able to watch his grandkids grow up if he doesn't make some drastic changes. Now that person has some serious motivation. Sticking with the stool analogy, being around to see his grandkids makes for a strong and sturdy leg. Even still, adding a few legs to the stool couldn't hurt. Perhaps additional motivation could include getting off medication because it's expensive or has undesirable side effects. Another might be that just seeing the grandkids grow up isn't enough, and he wants to be active and throw the ball around with them without becoming winded. You can see how with all of this motivation, the grandfather has a pretty sturdy stool and is likely to take action and stick with his plan, especially when compared with the person who wants to lose a few pounds to look better, but doesn't have any strong drivers behind the action. Keep this image of a stool supported by multiple legs in your mind as you think through your own goals. So recapping step number 1, before diving into specific goals, take a moment to brainstorm who you are and who you want to be. What are your core characteristics at the heart of who you are? If we begin our goals here, we will have a solid foundation to start with. Step number 2, staying big picture, jot down a few categories for you to classify each goal. For example, our firm uses the acronym FORM, F-O-R-M. This stands for family, others, recreation, and money. You could add more categories such as health, faith, learning, or anything else that is important to you. Try to keep them big picture, so if you love to play golf, for example, you can jot this down during our next step under recreation. Keeping goals categorized will help you brainstorm ideas in the first place, and it will also help you stay balanced. Some people might be very business driven, but you don't want everything you're working on to be related to your business or job. Instead, it's best to keep some balance so you don't neglect other areas of your life. Step number 3. With our categories laid out, our third step is to brainstorm as many ideas under each one that you can. Don't worry about being detailed, as this is the time for quantity over quality. For example, if you use recreation as one of your categories, list as many ideas under recreation that you can think of. We will pare down our list later. Step number 4. Now that we have a handful of categories and a long list under each one, we've got the perfect big picture framework. Now it's time to jump into our SMART goals that I mentioned earlier. The first letter, S, stands for specific. So we're going to go through each idea on our list and turn it into a specific goal. Sticking with recreation, if you wrote golf or improve my golf game, neither is specific enough to really give us traction. A better goal relating to golf might be to strive for a single-digit handicap or to break 90 consistently. Do this for each on your list. If there are any where you are having trouble coming up with a specific goal, skip it for now. It could be that this goal just doesn't really excite you, or it could be that you're not sure how to go about measuring it. This leads into step number 5. The M stands for measurable. So think through how you would measure each goal and jot it down. This doesn't have to be written in stone, but knowing how you will measure your progress will be like your compass, making sure you are working in the right direction. If you are trying to get your golf game down to a single-digit handicap, then you would have to commit to inputting all of your scores into an app or website that calculates handicaps. Not to mention, you won't be able to take those mulligans or quote-unquote practice shots either. For those of you who are not golfers and this sounds like another language, in short, the lower your handicap, the better. On average, this person takes less strokes to get around the golf course. This step should take a while, but as you think through how to measure each of your goals, you're probably starting to find that some make you excited while others feel like a chore. Keep note of this for later. Let's move ahead to step number 5, the letter A in our SMART acronym, which stands for attainable. For this step, you can go through your list and give each goal a plus sign if you feel it's attainable, a minus sign if it might be too big of a stretch, and a question mark if you're not sure. While it's good to set stretch goals to really challenge yourself, it's also a good idea to make them realistic so that you don't get discouraged early. For someone who has never saved before, starting at a couple $1,000s a month isn't near as realistic as a couple $100. If you are 20 handicap on the golf course, it's a lofty goal to cut that in half and go to 10, but it's probably unrealistic to shoot for something under 5. Taking baby steps and making your goal more challenging as you progress might be a better route. A good rule of thumb for this attainability step is to adjust your goal down if it feels unrealistic and adjust it up if it feels too easy and if it doesn't make you just a touch nervous. I think naturally we don't always give ourselves enough credit, so we're probably giving ourselves goals that are a little easier to hit and we need to stretch them a little bit. Step number 6, we move on to R for relevant. This is where we start with the end in mind and think about the why behind each goal. Why is it important to you? If we look into the future and envision that we accomplished the goal, what was the impact? Essentially, was this an important goal to pursue in the first place? I like to pick on the inefficiencies of our government, as their reality is often more absurd than any stories we could make up. In an effort to boost job numbers, many government programs have the effect of one man digging a hole and another following behind him to fill it up. 2 jobs were created, yet nothing good was accomplished. Or how our government recently spent $300,000 to find out if Japanese quail are more sexually promiscuous on cocaine. Now, this is a real expenditure that our government used taxpayer dollars to study. Even if this study was a success and they found a definitive answer, I think it's safe to say that it would have failed our 6th step of asking if the goal is relevant. Before getting off on too much of a tangent with that, let's move on to step number 7, time bound. This puts a concrete deadline on our goal. Losing 20 pounds might be a reasonable goal, but on the extremes, trying to lose 20 pounds in just a week or having no deadline at all are both setting us up for failure. We need to give ourselves a completion date. Further, having time-bound check-ins along the way will drastically improve our chances of success. This could include weekly or monthly check-ins to track our progress. This also allows us to tweak our approach if it's not working. They say an airplane traveling from New York to LA that is just 1 degree off will end up somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, a full 40 miles off target. Just like a pilot, we have to make small course corrections along the way so we don't end way short of our goals. Let's apply time-bound check-ins to our example of the person who is trying to lose 20 pounds in a year, but they never check their body fat percentage or weigh themselves until December 31st to see if they hit their goal. It's obvious when we say it like that, but a lot of people fall short of their goals because they missed the simple step of having scheduled check-ins along the way. So when we think time-bound, think of it as 2 steps. One being the deadline we're giving ourselves, and the second being the timeliness of check-ins along the way. We're about to wrap up with just 2 more steps, so stick with me. We're almost there. Step number 8, how. We know what the specific goal is, how we're going to measure success, and how long we are giving ourselves to complete each goal. Or maybe we just focus on one goal, which is okay too. So we know all that, but now it's time to write out the steps that we will need to do in order to get there. The more specific we can get, the better. For fitness goals, this might mean writing out or printing a workout routine that we're going to stick to. For business goals, this might mean planning out our calendar with all of the action steps we need to take. Spend some time brainstorming who could help you too, as we don't have to do everything on our own. This could be anyone from the golf pro at your local clubhouse, a personal trainer at the gym, or maybe someone at the top of your industry who could mentor you. Don't limit yourself by thinking this has to be a personal connection either. Some of my best mentors over the years have been the authors of books, podcasts, and newsletters. Some of these people I've later gone on to meet and create a personal relationship with, but that wasn't needed as a prerequisite in order to learn from their experience. Let's close up with our last step. We started big picture by listing out a few categories that highlight what's most important in our lives. Next, we brainstormed as many ideas as we could think of under each category. Then we got specific about each, converting our ideas into goals. From there, we made sure they were measurable, achievable, and relevant. And finally, we set a time-bound deadline for each with scheduled check-ins along the way. And last, we are going to look over our list, and as we read each goal, we're going to focus on how it makes us feel. Which goals stir up some excitement and make you want to get to work right away? They might make you feel a bit nervous too, which is great because we grow most when we are pushed out of our comfort zone. I was just listening to another financial advisor's podcast where he talked about doing things in life that you're afraid of. And when you feel this nervous feeling, to welcome it instead of running from it. This definitely was the case for me years ago when we decided to start our own firm. Going out on our own made for a lot of uncertainty. On top of that, we were committed to our flat fee pricing structure, something less than 1% of advisors were even offering. So not only were we starting over from scratch in many ways, which is certainly something few advisors do, but we were further going against the grain with our pricing model and a few other characteristics of our firm. I say this to share that I've been right there with many of you when it comes to taking on a scary challenge, but it's the challenges that make us a bit nervous that usually end up being the most worthwhile in the end. As we wrap up and you listen to me go over this goal setting process, you might have thought that it all just sounds so simple. And that's good. That means you can do it. I think too often we think that things have to be complex in order to be worth our time or our money. But just because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. Not everyone will follow through with this rather simple process, but I promise that those who do will find it valuable in the end. Whether that's taking value from simply brainstorming your thoughts out loud or coming away with some life-changing goals to work towards. I think there's something there for everyone. For those of you who heard 9 steps and are thinking it's just so close to 10 that we might as well round out the list, well, this bonus suggestion is for you. Find someone to work with on your goal. This could be an individual, a team, or maybe just an accountability partner who isn't doing it with you, but they're holding your feet to the fire. Sharing your goal with others can increase your likelihood of success simply because you're aware that others know what you're working towards. Notice how this is a bit different than what we talked about earlier regarding who could help you with your goal. That was more about finding experts who have already done it and learn from them. On the other hand, this bonus step is more about capturing the synergy of working together. They don't have to be experts in any way, but they do have to hold you accountable. I'm sure I missed some great ideas in my list, so if there's anything I overlooked, let me know. This is meant to be an improving list and a work in progress, not a finished product. I'd love your feedback on this episode, and please let me know what topics or questions you'd like to hear covered in future episodes. Also, if you'd like help clarifying your own retirement goals, or would just like to use us as a sounding board to review what you've done to this point, take the first step within today's show notes by clicking the link titled Share More and Get in Touch. This will allow myself and our team to put together a complimentary retirement risks analysis, which is personalized for you and your situation. Retirement risk analysis is a process that I developed and have refined over several years. And what it does is it takes the 14 biggest risks that retirees face and condenses your personalized results into a one-page report that is yours to keep. A lot of our clients love this because it's so simple, but it also addresses important questions. A few of those would be, first, with the market the way it is, are we still going to have enough to last throughout retirement? Second, are we paying any investment expenses or fees that are not providing additional value? To me, it's never about finding the least expensive solution, but it's all about receiving value in return for your dollars. And third, how much am I paying in taxes due to a rear view mirror approach rather than taking a windshield tax planning approach? Further, what else could I be putting those dollars towards? Whether it's a vacation of your own, or perhaps you'd like to help out the grandkids with a down payment on their first house or their college education, we always try to find something that you can get excited about that these extra dollars can go towards. Those are just 3 of the 14 risks that this process helps address. And once again, you can get started on that by finding the link in today's show notes titled Share More and Get in Touch. And of course, visit past topics we've already covered at healthywealthywiseretirement.com. Be well, and we will chat more in 2 weeks.
Thank you so much for listening and supporting this podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, we would love if you took a quick moment to leave an honest review. Of course, we're shooting for 5 stars, but if you have suggestions to improve the show, we would love to hear from you too. Just click on the podcast name, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Retirement Podcast, and scroll down to ratings and review. Thanks again for your support, as this helps us reach a wider audience and help even more retirees just like you. This podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a specific tax, legal, or investment advice. Lauren Sherman is a certified financial planner and co-owner of Integrity Wealth Management, an investment advisor serving retirees in search of their own healthy, wealthy, and wise retirement lifestyle.